Hello and welcome to the very first Miners Promise podcast. We are so excited to be here. Huge thanks to Josh and the Gold Room for facilitating this and for Dimitri for doing all of the editing. We really, really appreciate your support as we have done all year. We haven't done a podcast before, so we're a little bit nervous, I must admit, but we know that this will be impactful. It can be a difficult conversation, but this is a conversation that we need to have with our families, and we're really looking forward to sharing this podcast with you today. So I've got two amazing ladies with me in the studio, which I'm going to hand over to introduce.
Hi Debbie, I'm Müge Ozcan. I am a legal practitioner and a director, one half of Vitalis Legal. That's me.
Amazing. And you have partnered with us for many, many years supporting our families, and you've been so generous in your time and your care and your compassion.
Thank you.
Could you just maybe step us back, what got you into this part of law, and tell us a little bit about Vitalis Legal?
So I guess being a succession is part of our world, as you are fully aware. We started off in sort of in the business world, and then I'd meet clients and then obviously develop these relationships with their wonderful families with them, and then one thing would lead to another, and then I would end up being part of their estate plan picture. So it's always been something that I've done.
And Geniene?
Thanks, Deb. I'm Geniene Mairata. I'm the Miners Promise Family Support Lead, and I've been working in this role for 8 years, providing the beautiful tailored support that's delivered, emotionally with liaison work, advocacy. We do practical and financial support, and part of that, of course, is helping people navigate the steps that follow the loss of their loved ones. And so, we've partnered with Müge and Vitalis Legal for many years, and it's been wonderful. A very trusted journey that we've had together.
Geniene, one of the things that is very different about Miners Promise is that we journey with families as long as they need us. And we say in your own time, in your own way. Yeah. Do you want to maybe explain a little bit about the timeline for families following particularly a tragic loss, including workplace accidents, which so many of our families we support have gone through?
Yeah, absolutely, Deb. Well, as you know, when we lose someone very suddenly, and particularly in a workplace accident, and when there's an incident that occurs, the investigation that follows, it takes years. Yeah. So we walk by our family's side for years, and it's beautiful in that way. And and I think that's that is what makes us so unique, because we're not just there for the early days, weeks, and months. We're there for the long haul, and part of that can be challenging, but part of that can be really beautiful, because we see and discover new hopes with our families along the way, and see them emerge through and overcome difficult times, and whilst really honouring their loved one the whole way, which is really special to be part of that journey with our families.
I think that's a great segue, because what we're going to do is we're going to have the legal side and we're going to have the family and emotional side, and I guess what we're trying to do is encourage people to understand and break down what this means. Yeah. That's one thing we'd like to get out of this podcast, and maybe demystify some of it,
sure.
Make it a little bit less scary, and maybe make it a more positive, this is your legacy and a gift to your family. So
perfect way of describing it, a legacy and a gift.
Yeah, it is. So let's break it down a little bit. So we've sort of used the expression succession planning and estate planning, and I think probably a lot of our audience will be familiar with components of it. I think for today, most of what we'll talk about will be around wills. And I do have some demything questions to ask, but let's maybe just talk about, I think people do get a bit confused as well. So can I go to Australia Post and fill in a form? Do I need a lawyer? Is a lawyer going to cost me more than my estate's worth? So let's maybe just talk about the practicalities of a will and the different options to get one in place.
Cool. Yeah, so just on that question about whether or not I should go to the post office to get a will, I could probably give you many examples of all the cases that have gone through the court system where there's been the most amount of problems has been as a result of having one of the will kits from the post office. Yeah. So thinking through this, some clients do ask, why come through to a lawyer for? Why can't I just write this up myself? Well, there's a few different reasons why. You could do 7-8 years of study and have 20 years of worth of experience to come up with the right wording, or you could give it a go, and then what you're leaving behind isn't exactly what you may intend. The big thing about investing in a lawyer is having the right skill set to draft the correct document in the way that you would like it to be distributed. So if you don't get that right, it can cause so many different problems. Does that sort of...
It does, and we'll talk about not having anything at all. Is something better than nothing is my first question.
Yes, I would 100% say something is always better than nothing. Yeah, but yes.
But if it's not appropriately documented and written up, it can be contested, it can be challenged. It may not be reflective of actually what you want to happen for your family.
Absolutely. And not only that, I mean, if you're writing something up yourself, it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody contesting or challenging. It could just be the wording is incorrect and it doesn't convey what you're intending.
Misinterpreted.
Totally misinterpreted.
Yeah. And let's we'll talk a little bit in more detail around some of the facets of, if I'm thinking about going down this pathway, what age should I first have a conversation with my family about having a will?
I think if you're working, you start working, you turn 18, you become fully fledged adult in society. Yeah. Generally, if you're working and you would automatically be entitled to some level of superannuation, as soon as that occurs, that's probably the best trigger, basically.
That's a great threshold.
It is, And normally we have families that'll come in and we'll sort out their estate planning, and then they'll have, 2 teenagers who might be sort of just 18, started working, 21, and they'll say, oh, yeah, that, so-and-so has been working for so long. And we think, great, let's just make something simple because it's there. Yeah, because myth number one, I guess you only die when you're old.
Yes.
So, that's not the case as we regularly see, unfortunately.
Well, I think another myth, and I've got friends who are close to my age say, well, I don't have any assets, so it doesn't really matter. I don't have dependents, I don't have a lot of assets, it doesn't really matter. What do you say to those kind of,
Well,
folk?
Are you aware of what assets form part of your will versus what assets don't form part of your will? Are you sure you don't have what you think you don't have? I guess you don't know unless you actually invest in some advice to work through what is included in your estate when you die versus things that are traditionally outside of an estate. So
completely. And wishes on top of wills. Which I don't know if that's there's Deb's language now, not the professional.
Correct. Yeah.
But wishes, I think I'm going to pass to Geniene in a moment to talk about wishes, because I think sometimes how we want to be celebrated for our life and how we want to be remembered, and particularly if you've got dependents, your wishes for your dependents. I spent more time, I must admit, on the wishes side as a single parent with a dependent than I did on the actual will. And I actually found it was a bit confronting, but it was actually also a beautiful thing to do. So do you want to maybe explain how wishes can fit into your estate planning and succession planning?
So we have what we call a letter of wishes or a letter to the executor. That's not necessarily a document that is going to override what's actually the intention of your will or how you wish to distribute your estate or who you want to appoint. But it is very helpful for an executor and very helpful to give sort of context to why you're trying to achieve what you are.
Yeah.
And we encourage clients to do that, especially if they have young children, they're going through school. An executor is not necessarily going to know what you know about your children. So it's important, but it's supplementary. It doesn't actually, it's meant to be supplementary to your will.
And how often should we be considering the content of our will, and particularly, say, something like a wishes letter? How often should we be thinking about looking at it again?
100%. So it really depends, but normally we say sort of every 2 to 5 years or when something significant changes.
Yeah.
With the letter of wishes, which is why it's so beautiful to have, you could update that regularly without it actually impacting your will.
Yes,
even though most clients want to come and see me, they don't want to see me that often either. So it's probably better that they have this document that they can update at the back end without it actually impacting the distribution itself.
Yes, okay. Yeah. Right. And Geniene, you've supported our families for 8 years now. We work with families in their darkest of days and we support them in a journey of grief. how would you try and maybe give us some examples or a little bit of storytelling, obviously would be completely depersonalised, about what a journey for families is like when there is, the full estate planning in place versus maybe when it's not?
Well, we've seen obviously many examples of both, and what we're hoping to change here is to have more examples of people when they do have a will, because before it really compounds the overwhelming nature of when you lose someone if there isn't a will in place. And there's families are struck by this incredible grief fog, so it's really difficult to think clearly. And with the event of losing somebody, and if you don't have clear instructions as to what they wished for their loved ones, to what their own wishes for not only the estate but also just for things like their funeral and how they would like to be remembered and their legacy. So families that have had those conversations, there's so much more clarity and direction to sort of see through the fog. So in those early days, it makes it much, much more manageable. It also diffuses tension in families as well. We've often seen tension and conflict can arise if there's not clear instruction from the person that's passed away. And like you said, Deb, the conversation that you have with someone regarding how you'd like to be remembered or what special things you'd like left to special people, that can be a beautiful, enriching experience to share with your loved ones whilst you still have life. And life is precious. We don't know when our final day will be. I had this one beautiful man that came to us in his final weeks. Sadly, we thought he had longer, but he didn't. And he had all these wishes. He was telling me things on the phone in the hospital room. And then I asked him if he had a will and he didn't. So he was having a lawyer come into him and he was signing his will and he died before he signed it. The lawyer was with him. So that's the extent of how, and you do not want to be doing this in your final hours. So he was worried to his last minutes thinking about, leaving his, that he didn't have his wishes outlaid formally, that he hadn't had these conversations. And I was left with this information myself, and it was just, no one wants that. No. And so if you can have the courage, and it's a real gift, it's a beautiful thing you can do. You can enrich the conversations that you have whilst you're alive. It's an act of kindness because it allows your family and your loved ones to navigate life beyond you in line with what you hoped, would follow.
It's such a process where people feel relieved after they have been through their estate plan. It's almost like, great, we can just sort of bench that now and not worry about it. And it's good because, we try and make it as simple as possible. We understand it's not exactly great talking about death. However, it is a fact of life.
Yes.
And wouldn't you rather be prepared than not for that very reason?
Exactly. And there's that sense of it's for, it's not preparing to die in something, and you don't want to be doing it on your final minutes. That was just so hard to witness. If you have this in place well before, it's just peace of mind, and for your family, everyone knows it's done. And there's also, I think people, especially young people, like you referred to, reflected, they think life, they're time rich. It's something to do on another day, or when I have more more assets. But there's also people avoid it because it thinks that it's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, like you're willing death toward you. And it's like, no, actually it gives you peace of mind. It's better for your well-being. It's actually the opposite of that.
It is.
And in the examples of the families that have had those conversations, one of our families more recently had many conversations around this, and they were able to really beautifully celebrate their loved one's life in order with what she had hoped for and what she wanted. And her mother has been saying, I've had the conversations, we spoke about this, and she feels so much peace, with that knowing. And she's so grateful she had those conversations. And that was with a younger woman, so it's so important.
It's probably a good lead on now to talk about the executor of a will. And, I think that's something that when we do this process, we really do need to have a think about, who that person is and how that person may be impacted on their grief journey. And, is it how do we equip ourselves to be an executor, because some of us might be, and how do we choose our executor, and what sort of conversations are good to have in that process?
Yeah, so this is a big question for everyone, really. And most people don't know that the role itself can be quite demanding. And so, first of all, how do you choose someone? It should be somebody that's trusted, someone that's able to consult with others for advice. One of the critical things is that they're not alone in the journey of being an executor, but it can be stressful having to understand all of the obligations that come with that.
Yeah.
So usually we like to ask questions around, well, is the person sort of savvy with paperwork? Are they able to handle this? Have they got enough time to work through this? Because obviously there's sort of two levels of responsibility there. One where they're executing what's actually in the will, and the other part is then having to deal with a range of other people in trying to administer the estate.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy process, but they aren't alone. So how do you choose someone? Someone that you would trust, I think, is probably what it comes down to. And then have some really good advisors around that person that they can go and consult with if they need help, so that they aren't on this journey by themselves. So, there's situations like this. There are other situations where people don't have a will, and therefore there is nobody to put their hand up. It takes someone to actually say, I'll be the administrator in that situation. It's you become an administrator, it's an executor, but you're administrating, or you're administering the estate according to law. So that's where.
And how do you become an? Because you can't just put your hand up and say I'm the designated administrator. So how does that process work for families?
It can be very complicated. It can be very time consuming, and it can be very costly. And it does take someone to put their hand up to volunteer for the position. Yeah. So it's not as if someone gets nominated that role. Someone has to actually actively volunteer to be.
So
in
just
that
because
position.
I'm, say, next of kin doesn't automatically make me the administrator.
No.
And I hear the term letters of administration. So, if a loved one does pass away without, the estate planning, succession planning in place, and I say, right, well, I will nominate to be the administrator, then what do we do, and how long does it take, and what does that mean for the family?
So essentially, when people mention, and this is probably most people are aware that if you die without a will, the government controls the outcome.
Yeah,
that is a reality, because it is a government set formula as to who gets to receive their inheritance, and it's legislated. So essentially, you're allowing the government to determine how your estate is to be distributed. You have to be appointed. The court needs to approve the person that's being appointed as the administrator. If there are other people that could be appointed, they need to consent. So it can be very complicated, and when it's complicated, it means it's time consuming.
And it has to go to the court.
It has to go through a court, so that person has to be approved. And then once they're approved, then there's a whole bunch of other rules that they have to follow. So it's quite costly, and you might as well double, triple the time it takes to administer an estate.
Yeah. And you're grieving through this whole process.
And often having lost someone who has been a provider in the family too. So that whole gap period before any funds can flow, and bank accounts may be shut down, and mortgages still need to be paid, and it can be really, really hard. And we've seen it so many times, haven't we, Müge?
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
But so.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly my time on the board, it's the vast majority of people that we support don't have their estate planning in order.
Yeah, and like you said, it's far more complicated. They feel almost ripped off because they're having to prove who they are and their relationship with that person. And it's so hard for families, and they're having to dig out paperwork, and often they need to get their hands on things, but they're like, I can't get my hands on that because we didn't have a will. He didn't have the will, so now I can't get that to prove for the letters of administration. And it's just this overwhelming scenario situation. It's horrible. So
I think one thing you just said then is so important too, is that the families are left feeling like they have to justify about the relationship they had with the loved one, and it just must be so traumatic. Traumatic.
So it is a bit of a proving process about who you are. So if, for example, you're a spouse, a de facto spouse, you have to go to great lengths to prove that you are a de facto spouse. And when you're grieving, and you've been with that person for an extended period of time, it's the last thing that you want to be doing.
Yeah. And, it's just been horrible to see. We've had, de facto relationships with multiple children, and they're just like, I can't believe I'm having to prove that we were, in this relationship. It's all on, certificates, but it's that it's really they go to great lengths to push families. That's what it feels like. Yeah. So it can feel quite cold if you needed to go through that when you're grieving.
Yeah, it would. And I don't know, everyone's doing their job on the other side, but I don't know, really simplistically, I'd much rather that I have done this than leave the government to decide and a court to decide and my family having to feel like they're defending me in death for what I was in life to them.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, heartbreaking. We might move on and do. I've got my list, but I'm going to rattle through some myth busting because I think we've talked a lot, and I think we've already created an amazing batch of content for people to think about. But so we talked about choosing an executor. We do hear a little bit too about contesting and how do I make sure. These days with digital assets and we have this with families, access to social media and those memories and legacies. How do we protect all of what we want to, and how do we best set ourselves up so that what we actually want is what happens and protects from being contested?
So put plainly, make a will. I can't say that enough.
Yeah.
I mean, just invest in the process and have control over the outcome.
Yeah.
And that will streamline everything, including those digital assets. We can't shut a Facebook profile down if we don't have the correct wording in the will and we haven't given our executor the power to deal with that person's profile, for example.
Yeah.
So, or cryptocurrency for that matter.
Yes.
A lot of people are dabbling in all sorts these days.
Yeah.
But if you're not capturing that or not understanding how it sort of fits into the plan and it's not documented, it's very difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
So make a will.
So, and actually that's a follow-on question. So if I have a will but I don't have everything in the will, let's use crypto as an example. You might have I don't know how you invest in crypto because I'm just too old-fashioned. But, so say I do have a portfolio there and I've sort of forgotten about it or I didn't think about digital, does that then fall into that legal process we spoke about of needing letters of administration and, because it's not actually captured? How does that work?
It doesn't necessarily have to be listed as an asset as long as there is a document that appoints someone to control. So we're talking about the executor.
Yes,
as long as you have a legal personal representative, which is the executor of your estate, then and there's enough power in the document, we can trace and track and find if we need to.
So a common myth that we hear as well is about superannuation, which is obviously a key part of most estates, and then also your will. So if I've got my super and I have a defined beneficiary in there, what does that mean in relation to what may or may not also be in my will? Do I need one? Do I need both? How do they work and do they complement each other?
So usually we need both.
Okay.
Because it could be part of the greater plan that we require the super to be part of your estate. And if that's the case, we may need to rework your beneficiary.
Okay.
So one without the other, sort of not, it's complementary.
Okay. So
You
consider
need both.
both. Yeah,
Yes.
okay. And make sure that also whatever you've done in each one is the way that it should be.
Correct.
And again, it comes back to having the right advice and making sure. And I think with your defined beneficiary as well and your superannuation, that needs to be reviewed periodically as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
it's not a set and forget.
It's sort of 3 years. Most funds will at least remind you or not remind you. It may lapse after 3 years.
Because we've had that where it's lapsed with people not realising that you should. Okay.
Yeah, and strangely, my husband's binding death nomination came through yesterday in the mail saying it's now due, and there was an option to tick non-lapsing.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which I had. Is that a new thing, Müge?
It's been around for a while.
I don't think they've
but
offered
that
it
also
before.
has its downside, I guess.
Yeah.
You make a non-lapsing nomination, they may not send out another reminder to you, and then you've forgotten it if you're not actually reviewing your estate plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually that's another thing that's worth, like you said, when you need to review, because when your life situation and circumstances change and people haven't reflected that in their
Correct.
wishes, that can be
or
really,
in their nomination.
or in
with
their nomination,
superannuation.
and it may go to an
go to
ex-partner
an
or
ex-partner,
something.
yes.
We've seen that happen before as well.
Correct.
Which can
And,
be
and
really
most of us
hard.
have life insurance within superannuation as well, which can
Yes.
be significant.
Mm.
And if you've left someone on there that you made a nomination to from years ago and haven't updated that,
But your life circumstances have
correct,
changed.
might surprise the new partner or your family who may have been expecting those funds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, they both have to happen at the same time. That would be my opinion, at least. Yeah.
And if you've got the right advice, you will be reviewing periodically, and you can make sure that everything is updated.
Yeah, they should sort of marry up with one another and complement each other as part of your overall plan.
Okay, so I think we've touched on most of what we wanted to leading into this, and this is our first podcast. Remember, everybody, I think we've done pretty well, ladies. And this can feel like a difficult conversation. So if you wanted, everyone listening to this, to take away one message from both of you. You can choose who goes first, because then you're going to have to answer differently whoever goes second. Just, look down your cameras and really provide a message that you would like to leave with people around, they're going to listen to this podcast. Hopefully lots of people are going to listen to the podcast. What should people do? What message would you leave with them?
You can go first.
Okay. Probably invest in advice. That's what I would say. There are things that we think that are part of your estate that aren't part of your estate. Just spending time with someone who's skilled to give you that advice is actually setting you up for the future. Knowledge is power, as I say. Mm-hmm. So understanding what it looks like today will help inform how you go ahead in the future. And once you've done this, the next time you need to go through this again, when you're updating or when circumstances change, it is much easier to do. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the hard yards perhaps are really for me, not for the client.
Yeah.
But invest in advice. Don't try and do it on your own. It's what I would say.
And where should we store our wills? So I have a question I forgot to ask. So I've done it all.
Excellent work.
Then what do
done.
I do?
Yeah. So some firms or some law firms will have a facility where you can store with them.
Yes.
There is another misconception about being able to store them with a bank. I don't think most banks do that anymore. Okay. You could store them at home. It's just that the original is required if someone passes away. Yes. So having it in safe custody where someone can actually go and collect it might be a better option than keeping it at home. But,
well, we've had families who have thought that they've had a will in place and then not been able to find it.
Yeah.
At home.
Several times. Yeah, so safekeeping.
We encourage clients to leave their documents with us. Mm-hmm. It just makes it easier, and if they're updating, they usually then come back.
Yeah.
And then we continue to store. And then, we're actively trying to meet the executors that people appoint. So we've got this line of communication that if anything goes wrong, they can access us quite quickly, and that we are people at the other end. So
yes.
not just a firm sitting there. Yeah. So that does that.
And having the originals and thinking, it's in my hall cupboard. Well, it should probably be in a fireproof safe, and safekeeping means safekeeping, not just
correct.
Locked in my house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No worries,
Jeniene.
The golden rule, was it, or the final message?
What would you like to leave with people?
Yeah, I think to change how we frame wills, to think about it differently. It can be your final act of kindness, the final act of love that you gift your family. Just allowing them that peace of mind that they can fulfil your wishes, that you are leaving them with your affairs in order to reduce any possible conflict. And just to, allow them to be with their grief and celebrate your life and your legacy. So a final act of kindness, I see it as exactly that.
Right, so that concludes the very first Miners Promise podcast. Thank you so much for listening in, and thank you again to Josh and the Gold Room for facilitating this and donating the studio, the time, and obviously the very important editing process that will happen. Miners Promise are here to support families in their darkest of days. We journey with them for as long as they need us, and it is an absolute privilege and an honour to be there in those times. Thank you very much.